the Cincinnati Bengals. Imagine a Joe Burrow offense that we just saw this week, complemented by a defense. What the hell can happen? The ceiling, the sky's the limit when it comes to the potential for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're looking for a defensive coordinator. We thought last week, probably don't expect to hear a big name in the mix to land that, but then there were some rumblings from over the weekend that kind of have people thinking otherwise. What is your takeaway? I know that Matt Eberflus's name has been thrown out as a name to keep an eye on. I did just see an article a little bit ago that the Colts are going to be looking at Dennis Johnson, as you've mentioned in the past. I don't know. Where do you think the Bengals go from here? Or could we get back into the camp of expect a big name possibly?
I think those are the two big names that you could maybe expect. Al Golden, Matt Eberflus. I think outside of that, I'm sticking with no. I do think those two names are towards the bottom end of big name, right? I mean, if we go through the biggest names, Salah's number one. Then you probably get to the Staley, Dennis Allen region there next. And I still don't think the Bengals are going to go pay a Robert Saleh or a Brandon Staley or even a Dennis Allen. I just don't think that's what the route they're going to go. I think Al Golden makes a lot of sense. I think monetarily he makes a lot of sense. It would probably be about $2.5 million, which puts you at about $4 million for the defensive coordinator position, counting what you're paying Lou this year. And that's about what I thought they were going to go to, because that is top DC money. So I think that's how they convince themselves that we are committed. We are paying top defensive coordinator money by counting Lou's in there as well. And a guy like Robert Saleh would require 5 on his own, 4.5 on his own. I just don't think the Bengals would go that high. But Eberflus is an interesting one, because I think a lot of people are going to be turned off on him because of how the end of Chicago went, but he's a really, really good defensive coach. The Colts defense was at a point where he got hired as a head coach. And then, obviously he had his struggles as the head coach of the Bears, but Eberflus, he had the Bears as a top 10 defense when he was calling their plays. And as soon as he got fired, they dropped to the mid-20s. So that's a pretty significant fall off for just losing your defensive play caller and not losing any other real major pieces on that defense. So I would be very, very high on Matt Eberflus. He's a name that I think I just kind of put in that tier 2 area when we were going into the process, because I was pretty gung-ho about getting a Robert Saleh or someone along those lines. But I would be really happy with Eberflus. And I think he's one of those guys that does carry a little weight with his name, and I think it would show the Bengals are pretty committed to trying to win.
I don't think the Bengals will get a big name. This is just, Zach Taylor gets paid $4 million a year. They're not going to go out and pay a DC more than Zach Taylor, especially adding on to the fact you're paying Lou. I think it'll be a guy I've probably never heard of. I don't think we'll get Eberflus, and I don't think we'll get Golden.
So who was by the way, this all started because, and I wish I would have had the report pulled up, but who was the player that made the soundbite that led to everyone talking like this? It was a Bengals player that said, okay, so he said you're going to be, you'll be surprised, you'll be shocked or something by the reason I think it could be Al Golden too is just because, like, if basically making it sound as if he knows who it is. It sounds like it could be Golden too, just because you can't announce anything until they're officially done, or unless it's somebody that's on a current playoff team, which I do not anticipate that to be the case.
Yeah.
I think it could be that route. I think so. The biggest name it could be to me is Golden, just from that standpoint right there, because a lot of money to him is not a lot of money for a defensive coordinator in regards to what you would have to get to go get maybe a former head coach type of DC to come in. Also, keep in mind too, some of these defensive coordinators that are former head coaches, they want to be a head coach again. You got to be wary of that too, because if you bring in Matt Eberflus to be your defensive coordinator, you don't want that path to him being your head coach, right? Like, you don't want that. Like, I think some of these DCs, like Jim Schwartz in Cleveland, that made a lot of sense. I don't think there's a lot of teams out there that are ever going to give him the head coaching gig moving forward. He's a safe DC hire. I think that there's some DCs you got to be weary of because that could be your head coach if things don't go well with Zach Taylor in 2025.
I don't think Taylor cares about this guy could be my successor type of thing, because if he gets this hire wrong and the defense stinks, he's fired. So I think he's focused on getting the best defensive coordinator in this building to call the best defense possible within the constraints given to him by the front office. I think that's a big thing we always have to throw in there as well, is it doesn't really matter what everyone wants or how desirable this job is if the front office isn't willing to pay, which I think is what we're starting to figure out a little bit as we talk through it more, is they're probably not going to be willing to pay. But I don't understand why so many people seem sour on Al Golden. I see a lot of people throw his name in the list of classic Bengals moves, going to get a guy who's familiar with the team, just someone who's associated with the organization, and that's it, not doing your due diligence, interviewing anyone else. he's one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinators in college football. Coaching
Yeah.
Notre Dame and recruiting and dominating. I don't understand why people view that as a punt hire. I think Al Golden would be phenomenal. And it would also show that the Bengals are committed to getting outside of the box, going to the college ranks and getting the top defensive coordinator in college. That's a crazy move. I love that. I would be overjoyed and thrilled with that path being the way the Bengals go. I've seen a lot of people that seem to be sour on Al Golden, and I just don't, for the life of me, understand why.
I don't know what Bengals fans want, because you have to at least think about it a little bit rationally. You can't get the biggest name. Whatever big name you think is possible, it's most likely not possible. If you go this route, I do think it's attainable to get a guy who was one of the better defensive coordinators in college over the past, couple of years, and then you bring him to the Cincinnati Bengals and see what he can do under Zach Taylor for this couple year stretch here until, I don't know, when Zach Taylor's seat would become fully hot and they would have to clean out the staff again. But I think it's worth a shot if you can get him for under $2 million, right around there.
Look, Lou Anarumo around the league right now is viewed as a big name defensive coordinator hire for whatever team he ends up with. I'm here to say it doesn't matter if it's Al Golden. It doesn't matter if it's any name you throw out there. If they don't hit on their draft coming up, if they don't go and target some key guys in free agency, I truly don't think it matters who the hell the DC is. Could they marginally improve with the new DC? Possibly, but I don't think last year was necessarily a Lou Anarumo problem. You just couldn't underachieve the way they did for 2 straight years and keep everyone employed. Like, someone's head had to roll. That happened to be him. I think whether it's Al Golden, or if you go out and you get Dennis Johnson, or you go out and you get whoever, I don't think it matters. They have to hit. I think the draft coming up, I think it's the players. The players are more important than anything else at this point, because I think whoever they get as DC is going to be a solid defensive coordinator. But Anarumo was a very, very good defensive coordinator, and the ingredients for the chef just weren't that good. It's an ingredients problem, and if they don't improve the ingredients, I just think you're going to get a lot of the same type of tasting meal every single time. They have to improve from that aspect. I think that should be more of the talking point than who they get as DC, because if it is Al Golden and people are upset with that, and they're the same next year, it'll be proof that it's not the DC, it's the ingredients for the meal. And I think, to me, that's where most of the problem lies more than anything else.
I think the main reason Lou got fired wasn't win or loss or any statistic of the defense, but it was his inability to progress the young talent on the team. And I think that's where they're going with this next hire, is they're going to bring someone in who they believe can make the pieces on the team currently much more viable. And I'm talking about young guys like DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Miles Murphy, Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson. All these 8 of the last 10 top 100 picks that we've given Lou all this draft capital, and none of these guys have progressed to the level we want them to. I think that's where they're going. And obviously the draft's going to be important. We've talked about the holes on this team a ton. And if you're paying the players we want to pay, you have to hit in the draft, because you need cheap options at different places on defense and on offense. But I think step one for this DC is getting some of the young talent that's in this room, in this building, up to par with where we thought they were going to be, what we drafted them to be, because we have talent on this team, or at least we have talent on this team that we thought was talented before they got to Cincinnati. And since they've gotten here, it hasn't looked like that. And I think that is going to be step one for this defensive coordinator. Even before the draft, you got to figure out what you have, because if all of these guys are busts, then we shouldn't have fired Lou Anarumo, because that's on the front office for screwing this up. But if some of these guys can get to a level where they're at least starters that I'm not asking for Pro Bowlers or All-Pro. I'm asking for guys to be starters. Yeah. And we don't have that with a lot of the guys that we've drafted early in the draft. So I think that's the first step for this next DC, and really going to determine how he's looked at in Cincinnati, is can he get the guys that we already have here up to the level that we expect them to be at.
Yeah, and Elliot, you've said it many, many times. This defense, we talk so much. We focus on, look at the Broncos defense. You look at a lot of these, the Chiefs defense. The Bengals, they would love a Broncos defense. They would love a Chiefs defense. They don't need that. You just need an average defense. It's not as if we're asking this team to all of a sudden be one of the most feared defenses in the National Football League. But get off the field every once in a while. You know what I mean? You get that? I think that's what you're asking. It's not like you're asking someone to come in and ask for everything under the stars right now. You're just asking, come in and just stop letting the opposing team just move the ball at will. And that's why I think right now, there's a lot of good names out there. Unless there's just a name that no one's heard of and it's just a questionable hire, I don't think they can necessarily go wrong. The Al Golden thing, from Jacob's point, from a developmental standpoint, that's where someone like him probably fits what the Bengals are looking for more than anything. Because you're right. When I say, oh, the ingredients aren't good, well, the ingredients looked good in college, and they're coming from schools that put a lot of talent in the National Football League. Why is it not working? It could be the developmental problem, and that's probably what a younger coach like Al Golden will check off when it comes to that box. So we'll see.
I also think
Any closing thoughts on that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I think Al Golden, if you want to consider him a big name, he is the biggest name that doesn't have immediate head coaching interest.
Correct.
Brandon Staley would have a desire to get back into the head coaching world, whether he would have a job opportunity or not. Eberflus would probably have a little bit longer of a runway just because of how it ended in Chicago. But if he gets this defense playing as well as I think he probably would in Cincinnati, I think he'd be back in the list pretty soon. And you get a guy like Robert Saleh, he's getting head coaching interviews now. So he would certainly be in next cycle. I think if you're going long term, which probably is something that's on the Bengals' mind as well, I think Al Golden makes an awful lot of sense. I'd be pretty happy with any of those ex-head coaches or Golden, but I think in terms of money and years and progression, I think Al Golden hits it out of the park.
Yeah, stability is key there too. You're right. If you're interviewing guys that are taking DC interviews and head coaching interviews, their interest is to be a head coach. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of DCs out there that want to be a head coach, but that's just not going to happen, right? Like, that's going to happen for Eberflus. That's going to happen for some of these names out there. A Golden, not saying head coaching is not in his future, but it's not the immediate future. You want someone to come in here and have grow and have a little, sustainability with too when it's all said and done, stability and all that.